Welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us on Giant Screening's Right to Work webinar. We're so happy that so many of you were able to attend today. My name's Jenna Armstrong. I'm Head of Service Delivery at Giant Screening. We also have Kelly Pugh, Product Manager, and our IDSP partner, hooyu's Martin and Cameron. Before we begin, this webinar will be recorded and shared afterwards. You're welcome to share this internally for any colleagues that weren't able to make the webinar, and also to refer back to it at a later time if required. Today, we're going to start with Kelly running through what the new legislations and requirements are, what they mean for your business, and then a demonstration on the IDBT process from a candidate and client view via the hooyu and Giant Screening platform. During this session, you're able to ask any questions using the question box, and at the end of the demonstration, we're going to be answering as many of these as possible. If there's any questions that we don't get around to answering, we'll follow up directly to make sure that you guys do receive an answer to these. We hope you find this webinar informative, and we thank you for taking the time to join us today. I'm now going to pass over to Kelly to begin.
Awesome, thanks Jenna. So hi everyone, we're here today to show you and talk to you about the changes to right to work checks. We're going to touch on digital right to work checks during this, and obviously we've got hooyu here to help us talk you through that process. So we're going to talk through some of the changes first, and we wanted to just bring you some facts. Obviously the changes are happening from tomorrow, so just to set out what exactly is happening, what the changes are, and then we'll talk about some facts and considerations that we think that you need to consider based on our work with this through our customers. So what is happening tomorrow? So as of the 30th of September, we're seeing the end of the COVID adjusted check. So that's the legislation change that was deferred several times over the last 2 years, but that is coming to an end tomorrow. And that means that there's no longer an ability to do right to work checks via video calls and receive those scanned images via email. And then from the 1st of October, we will see 3 main routes for right to work checks: a new digital scheme for UK and Irish passport holders with in-date passports, and that's the bit that we're going to show you a little bit more of. Then we've got the continuation of the online checks for non-UK candidates, so nothing's really changing there. We've got those 2 routes, whether that's the online share code check or additional documents being used to use the employer's check-in service for a time-limited status use. And then, of course, we've got a return to in-person checks on original documents for anyone else. Now, anyone else here generally means UK without a current passport or without a passport, and then they're producing additional documents. So that's what the changes mean for right to work checks. And then we're going to talk about what we think that you need to do, or things that we think you need to consider. And we've been working with many customers over the past few months. I appreciate we've got a nice split on this call today between our customers and some new visitors to our services as well. So for some of you, I particularly might be a bit of a new face, but I have been sort of here for a few months now, and over the last few months talking a lot actually about digital right to work checks. So we want to be able to show our customers how this works for you, how we'll make it work, but also try to explain it to everybody else as well and go through some of the things that we've learned. So from the 1st, if a face-to-face right to work check is not possible, then a digital check can be processed and an IDSP must be used. Now I say must be used. The legislation, an IDSP must be used, and preferably that would be an accredited IDSP. Obviously we've got hooyu on the call to introduce them as our preferred supplier of these solutions, and we partnered with them to provide this information. And the accreditation at the moment for right to work checks, as some of you may know, it doesn't have to be an accredited solution, but it's highly recommended that it is, particularly when we think about the future of these services. You know, there are lots of IDSPs still going through the accreditation process, but it's the expectation that in the future that will be a requirement. And if we consider other services that may be encompassed by this change, such as DBS checks, that needs to be accredited. So, and we'll touch more on the DBS element later, mainly on basic disclosures. But think about that solution and how it fits in with your process mapping. And that's another thing that we've seen coming forward from customers, is that this is an easy to implement solution and it fits well within processes, but it is all about finding out where that sits for you. And that can be different dependent on your onboarding process, your recruitment process, and ultimately your screening process through to the end. So yeah, it's deciding about when this comes in, how you communicate that to obviously to your candidates, and then dependent on your requirements, source a solution that works for you, that aligns with your processes and does everything you need to do. And more importantly, with that accreditation, gives you the assurance that everything is compliant and everything meets the requirements of the framework that's in place. And then regardless of everything that, or the journey that they're going on, it's about recording the results properly. So obviously, we know we have to keep them for up to 2 years after employment ends. And if we're doing the face-to-face checks, this is very much back to the good old days, or the bad old days, however we want to look at it, of ensuring that they are seen face-to-face correctly, original documents, and that they are signed, dated and certified correctly. So that's a bit of best practice. Now, when we talk about recording the results and look at the stat excuse, just wanted to put this little bit of information here just to provide some information, and we'll touch on it a little later, that if this digital journey is being used by the IDSP, the output or the results, when confirmed, will give you that stat excuse, and it meets the requirements of the framework. That final sort of check in the box for anybody going through the digital right to work journey, and this has caused a bit of confusion with some employers, so I just wanted to take a moment to point this out, is that the stat excuse is there when the IDSP is used, and it will check that the document supplied is valid and linked to the individual and that that person was present. And we'll show you a little bit more of what that journey should look like for your candidates. But that final check does need to take place just to make sure that the person in the output of the report, so that bit's important, the person in the report matches the person that's presenting themselves for work. And another misconception, just to touch on it, is that some people feel like that check has to be done on day one, and it doesn't. It can be done before. And the check when used, or the likeness check, just to do that final tick, can be done on a video call. So that's where that video call can still take place once you've done the digital check and you're checking it against the report. And we'll touch on the reports later, but our reports will just give you, the selfie, the information that it's passed, that it's valid, and then you do that final check. And that final check is not set out in guidance in the employer's right to work check. So there's no right or wrong way of doing that. You just need to be able to satisfy yourself using your own policies and procedures that that person is who they say they are. And typically from conversations with customers, we're seeing this being done on induction, maybe during training, or generally just with the first point of contact that employee sees as they come through the onboarding process. So that's most of what you need to consider. This one we felt needed its own slide. It's the one that we're most passionate about, and that's the fairness and digital inclusion with this new route. So with those process steps, it's really important to consider how you're capturing the type of candidate that you're looking at, that you're recruiting, and how you set out which journey they go down. Because it's really important for us, certainly, and for others in the industry, that it's a fair process for everyone. And statistically, 20% of UK workers don't have a current passport. So that's a nice chunk of people that will need that manual check. And that could potentially take a little bit longer, and they shouldn't be treated any differently to the candidates that do have current passports and are naturally able to come through that recruitment process a little bit faster. So just important to consider that process. How are you detecting them? What kinds of questions are you asking them in order to determine that, and to make sure that everything aligns to provide that consistent, inclusive experience for everyone, really. So it's all about the messaging and the communications, but it's something that we're really passionate about at Giants, is making sure that everyone gets the same experience. Okay, so like I said, we've been working really closely with our customers, and we've got some feedback from some pilot checks that we've been putting through. Now, we will soon be able to have more insight and guidance on the trends that we're seeing. Obviously, we're working with probably every different sector, a multitude of different processes being used, and recruitment at different points of the process. So we'll be able to look at some of the data, get some feedback, and report back over the next few weeks, because the next few weeks will give us the indication of how this is landing with your users, with your candidates, and then obviously the ability to always enhance that and make it what you need it to be. So we'll be able to start talking about that for some time. But we've certainly, like I said before, we've been talking about this with our customers for a long time now, and most of you will understand what the changes mean, but there will still be some that, you know, this is quite new information for, and I'm conscious that there's a very heavy narrative being put forward across, you know, many platforms that 50% of employers are not ready for this, and maybe, you know, another percentage are not aware of what they need to do and why, and that might be true, but it's still, whilst it is a big change, and yes, it is coming into play from tomorrow, the main thing that we want to sort of reassure you on is that it is really easy to adopt, and once you have mapped everything out and understand your requirements, a screening provider will be able to pick that up and be able to support you with those compliance checks in order for you to get some of these results. So these are some of the results that we've seen so far. It is very easy to adopt, quick onboarding and implementation with little impact on time and cost. Once we know what we're saying and when you understand when this journey needs to be initiated, it's really straightforward from there. We've got some of the benefits here just to sort of give you an indication on what candidates expect in this new age of the new way of us working. And that is a positive candidate experience that's being seen. There's a very high response rate, which we'll look at more when we look a bit more at the journey and how that happens. But that response rate is vital at this point because, you know, right to work checks are typically the first point of check-in that comes in. So we want to, or you want to be able to move that candidate through that process as quickly as possible, get that positive result, and then quickly move on to kickstarting other checks if needed. You know, you might be needing to do some other data checks, possibly a criminal check might be included. That's important, and we will touch on it more, but if there were DBS checks included with a right to work check, once the candidate has come through this journey, you've got what you need to do the DBS ID validation. So that's going to speed up it doesn't speed up the process in the DBS checks at all. When I say speed that process up, it just speeds up the process of getting the candidate compliant with the ID validated, ready to submit the check. So that's important that we get that high response rate so you can kickstart as quickly as possible. And then the speed that we're seeing. So I just wanted to reiterate that this is the speed across both of the journeys. We're seeing that the ease of starting that request, the candidate is quick to pick up. So that's really important. That solution needs to be configured enough for you to know when to start, give the best messaging for the candidate to come through that user journey quickly. And ultimately, you as the end user, get those results as quickly as possible too. And we're seeing really nice turnaround times, which we'll talk about more, and who you can also sort of help us with talking about what's going into those checks in order to get the results back. So that's just something that we've seen so far. So now we thought we'd talk about the candidate journey. We've got some videos that we can run through and that you can see playing there. Now this is the solution that we're working with, and it gives you a great idea of what candidates want and need. So, you know, what does the candidate want? The first thing that we believe they want is they just want it to be easy. They don't want to be put off by this process. They want to know that it's going to be quick and easy for them to come through. So talking about the response rate, we'll just come back to that. Typically sending a text is going to get the highest response rate. As we all know, you're probably used to getting more feedback and responses from text messaging with candidates, but an email is also sent, and that's important because the candidate needs that different route to be able to do that. Maybe they don't have access to a device that they can do that with on their phone. This can be done on a PC or laptop with a webcam, and they get the same experience. So everything that you see in these videos that we go through, that journey is exactly the same for somebody on a web journey. It just gives them different options to upload and provide the selfie via the webcam. So what else does it need to do? Alignment is really important. You know, it needs to do everything you need it to do. It needs to align with you and your requirements, your branding, your communications. And that was one of the biggest reasons why we partnered with hooyu. The configuration abilities for us in our platform to be able to align that with our customer branded solutions was really important. So we're able to look at the messaging, look at the brand and the tone and what kind of candidates that we're talking to. So you might need to change that messaging for certain journeys, and finding a solution that gives you all of those options will help with that alignment to your process, because ultimately whatever solution that you implement needs to be part of your process very quickly from tomorrow onwards, really. But like I've said before, it doesn't need to be a scary process. The the providers out there, they're all doing a very similar thing. You just need to choose one that does that thing best with what you want it to do. And of course, the messaging is really important to achieve the benefits of this digital ID verification. This is a quick process. It's something that's easy and very intuitive, and new technology being used. And to benefit from the turnaround times, we just need to make sure that we're starting that correctly, that they know what they need to do. So we think that that's really important to the candidate journey. And obviously that we've landed here on the privacy agreement. So that's the next part really for candidate expectations. They want this to know that it's going to be easy, of course, and it's going to be quick, but also that it's going to be really safe for them, and the data security element comes into that. So just to talk you through what's happening here, when they land on this page, I'm going to get a bit of difficulties now with the playing of the slides. Bear with me a sec, technical problems, which we did overcome in our practice earlier. But basically what's happening here is it's presenting the privacy agreement to the candidate. So the first part is that they don't want an app download, and that's important as well. For ease of use, that ties into that. They want to know that they can access this straight away. They don't need to download an app, that they don't need to enter any login details, and that they're given the assurance of what the process is going to be for them moving forward. And yes, this video is probably not going to play, so we'll work through this. If I need to go back and change the view, I'll do that just so you guys can see what's happening. But the candidate support is really important. So what we're doing at this point, and what you need to consider as well, is if they're not happy, if they don't want to proceed with this journey, what do you do? How do you capture that information? So some candidates may need extra reassurance. This is a fairly new process to most. They just might need to know why they're being requested to do this, what happens, and just to make sure that you've got the privacy notice in place. The hooyu privacy notice is usually very clear to see on the screen, but we'll hopefully go through that now. So if your platform doesn't have that ability, or if it doesn't present that information to the candidate from the offset, just make sure that your own policies and documentation is robust enough to encompass all of this. Okay, so the candidate journey, the liveness check, and thankfully this is the most important slide, so this one is working. So liveness checks, or this type of ID validation, which you'll see playing here, is very common now, and it's becoming more common. But certainly doing this check for the purpose of employment is new to all of us. So it needs to be slick and smooth. It needs to give them the guidance. You can see here the candidate is coming in. This will be a very swift process. They're told exactly what to do, a quick liveness check, and then it will tell them what to do to move forward to capture that image. Now that's the image that we're going to be using on the output to do the validation. And I think at this point, Martin, that to talk about the final check. So it's taken that selfie and it's doing some validation in the background.
Yeah, thanks, Kelly. Yeah, we're doing a few things there actually. So the first thing that we do when we receive the image is we do a quick bit of triage before it goes for processing. So we make sure the image we receive is what we're looking for. So in this instance, it is an image of a face. We can clearly see the eyes, nose, ears, mouth, and we can see that it's a live image of a face. It'd be the same thing, although we're looking for different things on documents. Once we're confident that that image is what we think it should be, and we're confident we can work with it, we then send it to processing. So it then goes off for us to make sure that that image is a live image of that person's face. The picture on the face matches the picture on the identity document. There isn't deepfake technology being invoked. It isn't an image of an image, and we can pass back something confidently to Giant screening, and they can pass back directly to the customer. So there's a few things going on there. Some of them are user journey features, so that we don't capture images that we can't use. Some of them are processing features where we're making sure it's a valid document or a valid image we receive.
Great, thank you. I just paused it at that second just to finish talking through the selfie capture, and now it's going to go straight into taking the selfie. It clearly sets out what they need to do. No blurriness, the right lighting, and it is again doing another in-flight check, Martin, just to make sure that again, just like that image is correct and you're able to work with it. And that's really important. That we certainly are able to know that when we get that information from the candidate, we've got everything we need. It's done that check, and we're able to get it right first time, every time, and pick up what we need to do. So I think that's important as well. just to sort of relay what those checks are. And again, what's important for the customer, for the candidate, is that they get confirmation on what's happening. So I think the next slide talks through how they can get access to that. And so they would need to be able to see that what they've done is correct. Maybe on those final checks that Martin just talked about, they need to do another liveness check. So this one shows that it's successful. Perhaps it wasn't, perhaps the lighting wasn't quite right, and it needs to be taken again. But they are able to come in and save to return later. They get to know what's happening. Again, this slide doesn't seem to be conforming. I'll just take it back and see if it works when I take it on to the next step. But they ultimately, what it's showing here is that the liveness check is done. They're able to save their progress, and that's really important, that they're able to come out of that journey. Let's say they've done their liveness check, they've gone straight into the passport, but they haven't got it with them. We'll obviously set out at the beginning the items that they need, but at this point they could save to return later. The system will send them a link to come back in. So that's important as well, that they don't lose anything and they're able to just step back in when the progress is there. So when we get to the end of the candidate journey, final steps, they just need to know that they've done what they need to. I think that's the most important part here, you know, that you've got the information, and let's see, fingers crossed, guys, that this video works. It's not going to. But what it needs to do, and what we advise that the solution does, is gives you that communication. So what I'm about to show here, or hopefully in a few seconds, is that when the candidate's done and those final checks are happening. Now it's important, it says on the screen that that passport check usually takes 30 seconds, can take up to 5 minutes. And then that's where you can get the text to come back in to take a look at it. But the candidate can also receive confirmation of when those final checks have taken place. So usually it's going to happen within the journey and they'll know if it's failed or not. But if it does need to go off, they can receive a text message and an email to let them know when that final check is done. So I think that's important as well, that they are certain that when the system has got everything, they get that final confirmation message to let them know that that's done. And then that message is also really important, just to take it back to the communication as well, because at that point, dependent on what stage of the process the candidate is at and what level of screening they need, let's say, you might need to say something more to them. You might need to capture more data from them. So I think it's important at that point to make sure that the messaging that you're sending out clearly lets the candidate know what's needed for the next steps, because ultimately that could be some quick succession into some further checks that need to be taken. And again, I'm using the example of a basic disclosure, because if that's done hand in hand with this check, once we've come through the validation of right to work and that's confirmed, we're already meeting the requirements of basic DBS checks. So that can easily just follow on into submission. And that final line, I think, is really important, certainly for me and everybody else in the screening industry, is avoid duplicate data capture where possible. That is the biggest candidate frustration, and it's where they will become most annoyed with having to give even their date of birth twice, even their address more than once. And so just make sure that everything aligns, the systems are talking to each other, and you're getting the right signposting back to your users and also the candidates. Just going to give it one more try, but it's not going to work. But we're going to follow this up. So sorry about the technical difficulties, but when you get the recording, you'll see more of this journey in live play. I think the most important part that everyone hopefully needed to see was that selfie capture and that document upload. So thankfully we were able to show that to you, but we will follow it up with the full demonstration where you can see the videos. So I just wanted to sort of bring it to a close on the demonstration there, or the candidate journey, just to sort of look at what our customers have been saying and the feedback that we're getting, as well as some other surveys that we've been looking at. So some of these stats are really interesting to us and we wanted to share them, just to talk you through them. So 85% of employers said that they were considering the adoption of digital right to work checks as their main route of validation. You know, obviously that depends on the candidates that are in scope, and there will be some that can't come through that journey. But some feedback from what I've heard, you know, there's even talk of building in communications right from the start for these customers that prefer this digital right to work check, to encourage their candidates to have an in-date passport, to make sure that they get that at the beginning of the onboarding process. But like we said about the fairness and inclusivity, You just need to be mindful that while you would prefer that to be your main route, there will be candidates that can't come through and that they are still a valid part of that recruitment process. 68% are concerned about returning to face-to-face checks and the outdated recording of stat excuses. That doesn't surprise me. I mean, I called it the good old days or the bad old days at the beginning, but I think it is, you know, going back to that pen and paper, implementing a process within your organization that needs that level of contact. I don't think that that's landing very well. And there are talk of, you know, there's going to be ongoing talks about how we always improve this process, and that will surely come through. 71% say that they are likely to seek support with confirming internal processes to stay compliant. And that's where we've seen the bulk of our work. So working with our customers through those stages of process mapping that we looked at, and making sure that as a screening provider, we're able to provide best advice, really, so that those processes are compliant and that they stay compliant. And that's also really important, actually, to make sure that that solution is scalable for you, because this is new to everyone. And no doubt the processes that we implement, you know, they will meet the requirements and they will be robust enough to deal with the new checks that are coming through. But in order to stay compliant, the process and the solution that you source really needs to move with you, because what you implement now might not work for your business in a few weeks or a few months' time. And you may need to shuffle things around, and then whatever solution or process you've implemented needs to move with you to make sure that there's no disruption to that process and no gaps in the compliance. 63% will be looking to implement digital identity for DBS checks. That's, again, said it a few times, when we talk about DBS checks here, it's all about basic DBS checks. And Martin, I may come to you for a second to talk about the high level. So just to sort of take it back to basics a little bit, when we're talking about digital right to work, there's two journeys. There's a medium level journey, which is the right to work, and that's everything that you see in here, capturing that passport and the selfie validation. But that medium level of confidence, as it's called officially, is also the same requirement for basic DBS checks. When it comes to standard and enhanced DBS checks, which is where many people will also want to use this for those kinds of checks, there are high levels available. But at this point, Martin, I'll sort of lean on you to talk about, you know, what the imminent changes or the imminent advice from the DBS there on how we achieve those levels, because it's something very much for the next few weeks, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And when those things come in, essentially, as you said, that we've got different levels of checks that we need to adhere to as part of being accredited against the Digital Identity and Attributes Trust Framework and the GPG 45 that sits within that. So we've all gotten really good at acronyms over the last kind of 6 months and a year in bringing this up. But essentially, they've laid out 32 different journeys, identity journeys, and within that sit medium level confidence, which, as you said, covers right to work and basic DBS, and high level confidence being the next one, which is standard enhanced DBS and further. Essentially, once we start doing those, we just have to ask for more. So to get someone to a high level of confidence just means confirming their identity to a higher level, checking multiple different sources rather than the journey we've just seen. So the process is similar, but we may have to ask the candidate to give us more before we can do that. Yeah,
and that more will be utility bills, proof of address documents, everything that we're really used to, really, with those ID validation guidance. That's great, thank you. So yeah, on DBS, we may have some questions when we get to question time about that, but we see this picking up. Once we've implemented this new solution and it's live within our system, we'll move quickly into a solution for DBS checks and making sure that everything aligns and that you get the benefits from it as quickly as possible. So just to end on these stats before I pass it back to hooyu for a little while before question time, 89%, it's quite a nice high figure, which is really self-explanatory when we talk about what this stat is, that they believe the use of technology is safer and more secure when screening candidates. So not only is it important for the candidate journey that they come through that nice, quick, automated process that aligns with your organization, but they get the reassurance that their data is safe and it's being handled correctly by software and a system that was designed to do that very thing. So yeah, that's just some stats that we thought we might find useful and maybe possibly start some talking points on some questions that are going to kind of come through. And I think, Jenna, you've been looking at the questions and maybe put some forward now, but over to hooyu for a little while, just to talk about them and their amazing solution and why we partnered with them.
Yeah, thanks, Kelly, and yeah, thanks to everyone at Giant for having us on this webinar, and then to everyone that's joined. There's a huge number of people on, so that's awesome. The engagement on that is fantastic. I'm really looking forward to actually getting into your questions. That'll be the meat of it. So I'll try my best to do a really quick introduction to who we are, and what we do. So hooyu, as its own entity, has been serving customers and partners since about 2016. Our parent company is a company called 192.com, who you might have come across, some people on the call. That's been going since the 90s. We've always been really focused across both of those businesses on identity verification, specifically how we determine that someone is who they say they are in an increasingly digital way. So we've typically worked in regulated sectors like financial services. We've worked with tier 1 banks like NatWest and Virgin Money, all the way through to smaller financial services institutions, startups, and other regulated industries like online gambling. Essentially, where organizations have a legal requirement to verify someone's identity before giving access to any services, we've typically been a good fit. So becoming certified to deliver digital identity checks against the Digital Identity and Attributes Trust framework was a no-brainer for us for that reason. We feel we've got a really strong platform for delivering identity checks to a standard rather than to our own measure. And so we can pass that confidence back to our customers and our partners. And that speaks a little bit to our partnership with Giant. So us as hooyu, we were really keen to work with screening providers to deliver the service with them rather than working directly with employers ourselves where possible. And that's because we recognize that while important, digital identity for UK and Irish nationals is only a small part of the screening process overall. We're experts in identity. We're certainly not experts in the wider elements of screening. Giant Group are one of the best screening providers in the space. And so a partnership with them allows us to not only deliver robust digital identity checks to candidates, but also ensure that the candidate's whole screening process is as seamless as possible. And by putting those two things together. So with that, I think I did manage to keep that fairly brief. I'll pass back over to you, Kelly. But like I said, looking forward to any questions that come over that we can answer. So yeah, cheers, Kelly.
No, thank you, Martin. That was great. So Jenna, do we have any questions?
We do have quite a few questions.
Okay, great.
I think one of the most common questions that people are asking is, once we have conducted the IDSP check, is there still a requirement for a face-to-face verification?
Okay, so perhaps I'll take it back to that slide that we were looking at earlier, because that requirement is just to double check that the output on the, let me find the right slide that we're looking at, sorry, that the output from the IDVT or from the IDSP, which is the IDVT report, is the same as that person that's presenting themselves for work either on day one or before. So that's the bit that can still be done by video call if you've used an IDSP to provide that report. If not, then that would be a face-to-face check. Is that okay?
Perfect. Yeah, I'm just bringing up a couple of more of the questions. One of the questions is, if an employee has a valid in-date UK passport, what reasons could there be that the person does not have the right to work?
I can't think of any. The only reason, I mean, they might not be happy to come through the process. That could happen. Somebody with an in-date passport might not want to use this journey, and that's fine. You know, that's fine. It's not mandated that it has to be used by employers or by candidates, so that a face-to-face check would need to take place. But I can't see any reason why they wouldn't have the right to work. It just needs to be validated that they do.
Great. I think quite a few of the questions that we're getting are kind of around whoever's on the webinar maybe not being the end client. Can we just lay out exactly the process for recruitment agencies, etc., and their end client being the direct employer, and how that will pass through from them contracting with screening?
Okay, so I mean, again, if we're using the IDVT report to provide that start excuse, recruitment agencies, you know, are able to facilitate that communication to the candidate, to get that information back, to get that report. And then when we talk about that final check, their customers could be using that report to do that final check, which can be via video call, either on day one or, like we said before. But most people, from what I see, are building a process where the first point of contact, whether it's training, induction, or line manager, whether it's recruitment agency or the employer, they're providing that. But the stat excuse element is met with the IDVT report. And correct me if I get any of this wrong, Martin, by the way, sorry. So if any of that, the IDVT output information that I'm provided is not quite right, but that's my belief.
I think this might be a question for Martin. How long is the validity of the IDVT check? Is there a recommendation?
Not that I'm aware of. So we in terms of how we process the information, we process it in real time. So while the candidate's going through the process, we then pass all that information back to, in this case, to the screening provider, who then communicate with their customer. Beyond that, our job's done. So we pass back the medium level confidence. In this case, what we'd be passing back, and it goes from there. As to what the legislation says, I'm not sure if there is anything around how long it exists or how long the validity is. I can certainly go away and find out if there is anything there. Not that I'm aware of.
Yeah, my only point on that is that the results just need to be kept. So whether there's no validity, it's not going to expire. Don't need to go back and do any retrospective right to work checks, but you do need to make sure that it's kept securely for the right amount of time in line with the retention period.
Perfect. And one of the most recent questions was, how do they carry out a right to work check in the absence of a UK or Irish passport?
Okay, so if there's no passport or an out-of-date passport, a UK candidate would need to provide their birth certificate plus proof of national insurance, and that would be that face-to-face check. So making that arrangement to see those original documents. And again, back to the way that we used to do it, signing, dating and certifying that confirmation correctly.
There was another follow-on question to that one as well, around if they don't have a valid UK passport and a face-to-face check isn't possible, is there any other option to validify the legal right to work in the UK?
Using the passport, the birth certificate, sorry. So yeah, birth certificate and that proof of national insurance, which everybody usually has access to that. But again, those face-to-face checks could take a little bit longer in that respect, because they need to collect that information, possibly get copies of their birth certificate and the documents that they need. But that's what needs to happen.
Perfect. We do have one question around once we've completed the right to work process, what documents the client can view in regards to confirming that we've run this check. I'm more than happy to answer that one.
Yeah, you take that. That's a service delivery question. You go.
That is definitely service delivery. So once we've gone through the right to work process, whether that be verifying the share code, verifying any other documentations, or via the IDVT route, what we will do is be uploading a document that we refer to as legal right to work confirmation, and this will document exactly what evidence the candidate has provided and also what we have done to validify that document. So for example, you can receive a legal right to work confirmation document that will have the screenshot of the IDVT process, the confirmation that it has been verified, and additional candidate information just to confirm that we have run that individual's passport through that. Alternatively, you receive a right to work confirmation document that lists out exactly what documents the candidate's provided, and also on there is a prompt on what action as an employer you guys need to do next. So there will be evidence included in what our current clients, we refer to as the final report. And following on, we're more than happy to share the examples of what these legal right to work confirmation documents will look like.
Thank you. Thanks, Jenna. Yeah, but ultimately it's just giving you the confirmation that the passport has been presented, it's been verified, it's UK, we do have right to work, that the image that presented, then the candidate presented during that journey matches the image on the passport that they presented, and further to that, that the person was there and was live and present, providing that information. So yeah, those reports, those two different versions will usually set out then, and that's important from the provider that's giving you the responses. You need to be able to know that the requirements have been met, whether it needs to be face-to-face or whether we do have this positive verification, and that final likeness check needs to take place.
I do have a couple more service delivery questions if you're happy for me to answer.
Yeah, we've got 5 minutes, so plenty of time.
Perfect. So yes, you will receive a copy of the verified right to work via the IDSP. That will be included in the legal right to work confirmation documents. And once we share the recorded webinar, I'll make sure that both of those documents are included as an example. This is a service delivery and a hooyu question, so Martin and Cameron, please feel free to jump in. Just around how long it takes from requesting the right to work until we upload the confirmation from the IDSP. So we are saying 24 hours. So that's based on the candidate completing our online application form to ensure we've received the correct documents and the correct information we need. We then run through the IDSP part and then we will upload that legal right to work confirmation for you. Martin, correct me if that was wrong.
No, yeah, perfect.
Perfect. The other service delivery question we had was around whether the right to work workflow will be separated from all other checks that existing clients currently process through us. So there is two options. We can either, one, include the right to work as a standalone workflow. Now this usually sits for clients that maybe run the right to work check before or prior to running any other screening checks based on their onboarding process. For example, if the right to work check is done at interview stage and then you're not required to run any other checks until maybe day 2 or 3, or at probation stage, we can do that as two separate workflows. However, if you'd like to include the right to work check in your current workflows, again, we can configure that to do so. Also, we had a question around what other information we need from you as our client. We don't need any additional information other than the basic that we request to start the check in our system. I know that might not make much sense to potential clients or anybody that's joining that is an existing client. However, we just need those few bits of information, and it's just additional questions and one extra piece of data that we ask from the candidate.
Yeah, just to talk about that as well, I think we've mentioned how we're implementing this and how we are making this live within workflows. For those customers on the call that that are already accessing this service, nothing really changes. So you don't need to activate anything. We're going to make the switch over, and naturally those candidates are going to start becoming detected that are able to go down that journey, and they will receive that text message and take it from there. Okay.
A very common question that we've got, and I think it's great if we're due to finish on this question because it seems very common. If the business has no offices, they're all 100% remote, so face-to-face isn't possible, what is their process?
Okay, yeah, and this I've spoken to a couple of customers that they changed their whole way of recruiting during the pandemic, and like many other organizations, they don't generally see all of their staff and they do work remotely. And it is the answer is that it is probably going to be a bit more challenging, really. It is being lobbied at the moment, and there's lots of talk about coming back to the fairness and inclusivity part of it. That's a very big piece there, and with that holding some people back, that's when I talked about some of those types of organizations talking to their candidates earlier within the recruitment process to say how important it is that they do have a valid passport, specifically if they're working remotely. But where that's not possible, yes, there will be a challenge to get that in play. But that's where that process mapping and really takes effect, and the solution that you've got in place that's able to support that with communication, with signposting, making appointments, and working with your HR system, really. But it's ultimately going to be a challenge. But we're going to share more information. I think that over the first few weeks of this being used by the whole of the UK, there'll be a lot of sort of hard-hitting data and feedback that's going to be used by those groups that are taking that forward.
Perfect, thank you. I know we have a lot of questions around the cost and how this service will be implemented, maybe for current clients, or how that can be included in workflows that don't just contain the right to work. I know that we are finished with the webinar now. However, we'll follow up on all of those cost questions directly, and any other questions as well that we didn't get the chance to ask. I know Kelly has a slide to detail the email addresses that you can contact if you do have any other questions or queries. Please feel free to get in touch.
Great, yeah, just got those contact details on point. Sorry, those contact points on the screen just to show who to get in touch with if you want to learn more about anything that you've just seen. Okay. So thanks everyone. Thanks Martin and Cameron for joining us. It's great to have you on the call with us, and we're really looking forward to this partnership and moving forward with these checks.
Yeah, likewise. Thanks everyone.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks.